in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the state right next door. It also shows what capitalist society considers a crime, because you look at someone like Richard Nixon, who wound up being president, committed all sorts of terrible crimes, and never served a day in prison for any of them, even the ones that he was convicted of. When we talk about Eugene Debs, how many people have heard of Eugene Debs in this room? Okay, a good number. It's not something that you get taught in classes most of the time, unfortunately. I certainly wasn't taught about Debs in class. Debs's politics were forged when he was the leader of a strike in 1894 against the Pullman Rail Company. It was the first major national strike in the history of American capitalism. It shut down, which was a key industry at the time, the rail industry, and it was brutally suppressed and smashed by the U.S. Army, called into action by the President of the United States at the time, Grover Cleveland. So what was crucial to Debs' conception of socialism was what American socialist historian called socialism from below, that the working class is the agent of socialism, that the working class will construct socialism out of its own struggle and its own interest for a better society. One of my favorite quotes from Debs, there's lots of them. There's this great review of a biography of him that's in the new issue of the International Socialist Review. People should check it out, particularly people who've never heard about him, so you can learn about a great working class leader whose history has been stolen from us in this country. He said, "I would not lead you to the promised land, because if I could, someone else could lead you out. You must use your heads and your hands and get yourselves out of your present condition." So for Debs, like the great Marxist socialists before him, like Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, Rosa Luxemburg, and others, socialism had to be the act of the working class itself. And so that conception of self-emancipation is kind of the A through X of the ABCs of Marxism. There's more stuff, but that's what's really basic and central to how we in the ISO see in International Socialist Organizations see socialism and socialism from below. So socialism is not going to come from voting in a socialist president. So even if Obama was a socialist, as they were saying he was, voting for him wouldn't get us any closer to socialism. Voting for a socialist majority in Congress isn't going to get us there. And when we talk about socialism here in the ISO, what we're talking about is equivalent to the democratic collective management of society by the working class in the interest of the working class. And the working class is the vast majority of society, pretty much most of us, or not all of us here in the room. And how we get there closer to a socialist society is a subject that I'll return to. But right now, I want to talk about the outcome of the actual election that we had last year, and what that means to be living in the age of Obama. And the fact that Barack Obama was elected illustrates a seismic shift in U.S. politics. We have a black man in the White House in a country built on slavery, in a White House that was actually built by slaves. We have end of 30 years of Republican rule. There's like an 8-year interregnum with Bill Clinton as president, but when he was in office, he more or less carried out all the policies of the Republicans before and after him. And we've had 30 years of backlash against the gains of the social movements of the 60s and 70s. And since Obama has been elected, it's worth asking, what have we got? And from my point of view, we've gotten not much. We've actually had an escalation of U.S. imperial involvement in Central Asia. I mean, I, for one, didn't think that Barack Obama would want to occupy more countries than Bush already has, even though I knew he was committed to maintaining the occupations of them. So anyone who's been paying attention to what's been happening in Pakistan lately with the U.S. Armed Forces will know what I'm talking about. We've gotten next to nothing for LGBT civil rights, despite millions of dollars from LGBT organizations going to the Obama campaign. And in fact, it was Obama's anti-gay marriage stance, which was directly responsible for helping with the passage of Proposition 8 in California, which was actually a referendum that stripped people of their civil rights, where LGBT people were no longer allowed the right to marry in California, which sparked a massive fight back, which we have the pleasure of still witnessing, and I'll return to that as well. And Obama's been ruling as the banker's president, continuing the Bush policy of bailouts for Wall Street, nothing for quote-unquote Main Street, which is the rest of us besides the Wall Street parasites and vultures. And all of this is happening in the worst economic crisis in 80 years. What we're seeing is capitalism failing on its own terms. from my point of view, capitalism has been failing since the Industrial Revolution, if not before, where it produced misery, poverty, child labor, the 18-hour workday, and all sorts of other horrors. And this protracted economic crisis has destroyed the free market consensus that has dominated American politics for the last generation. They used to have a saying, there is no alternative to the free market. Now there's no alternative here and internationally to government regulation. And I happen to be perusing Business Week today. Yes, sometimes socialists take the time to go through capitalist magazines like Business Week, and the front cover is like, markets not going anywhere. So the front cover of a capitalist magazine, Business Week, is telling us that the stock markets are not going to be improving. So that's their own forecast. And from our point of view, and not Business Week's, we have massive unemployment among young workers, people the age of most of us in the room. Unemployment amongst young workers is reaching like Depression-era levels, high 20s, low 30s. Massive job losses. Like since last November, there's been the number of jobs lost has been equivalent to something like the number of workers in New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, and I think one other northern New England state combined. So over 2 million jobs, close to 3 million now. And for college students, the skyrocketing of the cost of education. How many people here go to UMass? I was here in 2003. It cost $7,000 a year to go to school here. I'm back here in 2009. It's now 11,000. So we've had what? We've got math majors here, but that's a big increase, tremendous increase in how much it costs to go to school here. Even worse things are happening in other university systems. You're talking about privatizing the University of California system because of the massive budget shortfalls. We're seeing a charter school invasion in our public high schools, and all this is happening. I hear all this stuff about budget shortages and how they can't pay for anything, and we need collective sacrifice, this and that. But I haven't heard one mainstream politician say we need to tax the rich to get out of this crisis. Oh, we have a budget shortfall. Let's end the occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. That'll free up some money for public higher education. Oh, there's not enough money for single-payer health care. Let's end these wars and occupations. None of that. More of the same. More tax on us. More tax on our living standards. More tax on our education. But there's a flip side to this political moment, and that's the fact that the Bush years are over. Even though we've had liberalism coming to power and continuing its policies. And I think it's a good thing that these people are out. I joined the ISO right after George Bush was reelected, and I'm so glad I don't have to see his face on the cover of newspapers every day. I don't have to see that smirk on Meet the Press. I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad the rest of the war criminals in his administration are gone. And I'm also glad that socialism was brought back into mainstream discussion by John McCain's campaign for president, of all things, ironically. This was a man who ran the most racist presidential campaign since Richard Nixon. This is a man who had nothing to offer any of the American people to vote for him as president. So he ran on the I'm not the black guy racist platform. And this is the man who called Barack Obama a socialist at every turn, which was actually kind of cool for socialists, because every time, not only did every time Obama get called a socialist, his popularity go up, the popularity of socialism went up. I like to think that sales of the Communist Manifesto jumped every time that Obama was called a socialist. I can't confirm that, but I'm optimistic. I mean, you see stuff like the right-wing polling agency, Rasmussen, finding out that socialism is, by people under 30 is favored something like 33%. That's huge. And right now, socialism is more popular than the Republican Party, which says a lot more about how widely hated the Republican Party is than what it says about how popular socialism is, even though we are getting quite popular, which is another good thing. And there was this cover of the capitalist magazine, Newsweek, that said we are all socialists now. How many people saw that news cover? Okay. Chunk of people. So Newsweek, one of the most widely read magazines in the country, and it's talking about how we're all socialists. Great opportunity to talk to people about what socialism means. Unfortunately, when institutions like Newsweek say we're all socialists now, they mean